Good evening. My name is Harold Mendelson, and this entry is for week 3 of History 701D02 class, the topic being requiring the use of the Sabin American database, Christianity in the early American history is the topic. From its early inception, colonies there was a basis for religious protection and freedom. After King Henry VIII threw out the Roman Catholic Church and replaced it with the Church of England, placing himself as the head of that church, there were sects within the Protestant faith that started up protesting the Church of England for various reasons. Most of them were nitpicking, and for example, the way the services were conducted, the way that some of the practices within religion took place. Unfortunately for these so-called protesting Protestants, they were not treated well by the Church of England or by its leader, the current monarch of England. Over time, conditions grew worse. In some cases, the leaders of these sects were arrested and tortured and even eventually executed. Others were just imprisoned. What ended up happening after that was simply it grew more and more intolerant of these sects. Eventually, it was decided by these various sects at different times that they had to leave Great Britain. The question is, where would they go? If you looked at Europe, it was less tolerant of different religions than was Great Britain. The only thing that looked promising was the colonies in America. By the time the people of these protesting Protestant sects were willing to go overseas, the colonies had been pretty well developed, and there was a feeling of religious freedom. Nothing was formalized. Each individual colony had set up its rules and its choices. And so these various protesting Protestants decided to migrate over to these colonies. A few examples of these would be the Puritans, the Baptists, the Presbyterians. There were others as well, and they were well established by the time the United States, the colonies, had declared the Declaration of Independence in 1776. They broke connection with the King of England, who was the head of the Church of England, which means they also broke precedents with the Church of England itself, although there were still those who practiced that faith and did so without recriminations. When we look at the Declaration of Independence, we specifically see in there that they were concerned about developing the ability to have freedom, including the freedom of religion. And what followed after the war for independence was won, and then some years afterwards, the U.S. Constitution was established, and shortly after that was the Bill of Rights. And specifically in the Bill of Rights and the U.S. Constitution were those freedoms. And the first freedom in the Bill of Rights was the freedom of religion. Now, certainly throughout having the war for independence, the freedom of religion was not the primary concern. It was taxation without representation and the deteriorating relationship between the colonies and the King of England. Now, when the Treaty of Paris in 1783 was signed, this was the formal breaking between the breakup, or divorce if you want to call it, between the colonies, which by now were the United States of America, and Great Britain, and also the King of England. There would still be conflicts and such after that, but that was the primary goal. Now, certainly during the Revolutionary War, not every colonist was in favor of breaking away from the King of England. And there were two separate groups, the Whigs and the Tories. The Whigs were the colonists that wanted freedom, and the Tories were those who wanted to remain loyal to England. But still, in spite of that, and the fact that there was armed conflict between the two groups, well, in the end, everybody sort of came together, and eventually the British Army and those citizens of the colonies that could not tolerate the idea of a breakup with England were allowed to leave. Those who remained were allowed to live their lives, for the most part, in peace. In addition to that, we see that the way the government in the United States is conducted represents a form of Christianity. Every public office holder takes the oath of office, and they did so at that time period, and they do it till this period now. And in those days, every official placed his hand on a Bible that not only had the Old Testament, but the New Testament as well. This again represents a form of Christianity. All of our founding fathers were Christians. And they were not Roman Catholics, they were actually Christians of the Protestant faith. And it wouldn't be until 1960 that we actually had a Roman Catholic president. And even today, our current president claims himself to be a Roman Catholic, but it's still a form of Christianity. Now, the laws are created as part of the Christian faith, and enforcing of those laws are done in a Christian manner. We have seen attempts by various missionaries during this early period in our history to go out to the natives who were pacified, meaning they weren't at war with us, to become Christians. It wasn't always successful, certainly. And today, in fact, it's even looked down upon, it's frowned upon, because, again, with religious freedom, people have the right to believe in what they believe. And the Native Americans now have tended to fall back on that, although there are those that do practice some form of religion outside of what their heritage is. Furthermore, the people who were involved in the government, the leadership, the military, they themselves were practicing Christians, some more than others, and certainly as humans, we were all fallible, and they weren't always living up to the ideal and goals of Christianity, but still, for the most part, they practiced what they preached. In conclusion, I would like to say that it was the faith in the Supreme Being, in the form of Christianity, and in the belief of Christ in the beginning that allowed our nation to continue. We knew that we would face adversity. We knew that there would be hard times. When I say we, I mean the citizens of the country at this time period. And as a result, they endured, which is what we are told to do. And they knew that in the end, they would be coming out on top. If you have any questions or comments on that, please feel free to reply to me, and I would appreciate it. Thank you very much.